Good evening, everybody, and thank you for viewing. My name is Dennis Baker. I'm the Business Program Director, and here we have a live stream only panel with actors in various local markets. We have actors from Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas, Fort Worth, and Boston, all here this evening to share their points of view, their journey, and how they are making the actor life work at where they live. Thank you again for viewing. A couple notes before we get started. One, we want your questions, so you can send us your questions two ways. One through Twitter. Use the hashtag SAF or SAF, again, hashtag SAF, or you can email us at livestream@SAG-AFTRA.foundation. Again, that's livestream@SAG-AFTRA.foundation, and then we'll get your questions in as they come in. But let us get started. I'm going to have our actors introduce themselves. For first, let's start with Marie. Kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, Marie, and your journey to getting to where you're at now.
Hi, so my name is Marie Burke, and I live here in Atlanta, Georgia. And I ended up here. I'm from Montana originally, but I wanted to go study in Los Angeles, and so I went there. I felt like I got a really great education. I feel like I was really ready to go out and do acting, but it was really difficult to find an agent. So I booked a lot of non-union stuff, but I couldn't find an agent. So I met a great acting coach at church there. She ended up moving to Atlanta right after I met her. So for 2 years, we talked back and forth about what was going on here in Atlanta. And at that time in LA, the only thing we knew about Atlanta was Vampire Diaries and Walking Dead. But she promised me there was a lot going on. So took a leap of faith, headed out to Atlanta, and I've been here for 4 years and I love it. So that's how I got here.
Thanks, Marie. Let's jump to Charles in Chicago. Tell us a little about yourself and how you, why you were in Chicago, Charles.
Hey, everybody. Charles Andrew Gardner, and I was born and raised in Chicago, and I always had like this amazing attraction to the city, the theater scene here, and when I was growing up, it wasn't really a lot of film and television here, but just the theater and just the idea of being an actor in Chicago always excited me. Went away to school to Northern Illinois University, got my BFA in acting, Meisner, and came back and just got right back to it. Did an internship at one of the casting agencies in Chicago, PR casting, then they were TPR, and just, wanted to understand how the casting decisions worked in Chicago and how the acting scene worked in Chicago. So I stuck around and been working ever since. So, since then I've been doing a bunch of VO work, a bunch of commercial work, theater work, and television and film when I can get it.
Thanks, Charles. Next up is Morgana. Tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're located.
Hello, I'm Morgana Shaw, and I am in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I was born and raised in Dallas, and my journey started as a dancer. I was dancing with a company, and I was in a car accident, and I couldn't dance, and I took a film class. The film teacher just happened to be an agent, and she told me I had a raw talent that and she'd like to sign me, and that started my journey. I've had an agent ever since, and my first big role professionally was in '96, a movie called Promised Carolyn, and that sort of opened all the doors for me for my journey for acting and film, television, and I do stage and choreography. I wear a lot of hats. I think you have to.
Nice. Great. Thank you, Morgana. Lewis, last but not least, tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're located.
Sure. Hi, my name is Lewis Wheeler, and I was also born and raised here in Boston. And I grew up in a family that did theater. My father was a theater director, and my mom was an actress, so it was sort of the family circus, really. And so I was sort of immersed in it, always doing it. Went off to college to Cornell, studied acting, but also film production work, and I got really involved in that. So after college, worked in film production, assistant editing, assistant camera work, production managing, loved film of all kinds. Went off to AFI for film school, directing, and then was producing smaller stuff, some documentaries, and production managing a lot of things based out of Boston. So I moved back to Boston, and I was always sort of acting on the side, taking classes, doing things here and there. And a friend was doing a play, Connor McPherson's The Weir, at a community theater. And I played Brendan the barkeeper in it and just fell back in love with acting. I was like, I got to do this. So that was 2003. And since then, mostly doing theater work, joined Equity in 2004, but also a lot of film and TV that has luckily been in the area, in Massachusetts. So, whatever I can find, I've been lucky enough to be in, Manchester by the Sea and Black Mass and Company Men, some other films that were shot around here. And variety of other freelance work, which I'm sure we'll be talking about. So,
great. Thank you for each one of us for joining us. We appreciate that. Let's get started. Charles, how you start us off? What is the type of work that you're seeing most in Chicago? Talk a little bit about what projects you're auditioning for the most, kind of what's kind of the most consistent type of work for an actor in that area.
Well, really, it depends on what you're trying to do in Chicago. Our local is pretty good because it has tons of commercial work because we're a pretty big ad town. So I do a lot of voiceover, and that's what I see on a regular basis. But some actors who, lean more into the theater side, we have over 200 theaters, small and big houses, and you can constantly work as a theater actor in Chicago. So it all depends on what you want to get into.
Great, thank you. Marie, what's busy in Atlanta? What's happening there most consistently for actors?
So there's a lot happening in Atlanta. TV shows, films, that's probably the biggest thing. Obviously, you might have heard of Hidden Figures and Stranger Things won the SAG Awards last night. That's filmed here in Atlanta, so we're really excited about that. But there's tons more TV shows and movies coming into Atlanta and Georgia all the time. There is a lot of commercials as well, not as many union commercials as you might find in New York or Los Angeles. Voiceover, I'm not too familiar with how much voiceover there is here. I know a lot of my fellow actors do voiceover, but I can never really tell whether it's actually being done here or if they're recording in their own private studio and even using the content from their private studio or going to a local studio here.
Great.
So mostly TV and film.
Nice. Morgana, what's kind of happening in the Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas area that seems to be consistent for actors?
Well, again, sort of like Charles said, it depends on what you're into. Because for me, I do a lot of film and television. I book some commercials here and there. There's a lot of commercial work here in Dallas. There are a few TV shows that come in and out. I know Queen of the South is just starting up. But a lot of the things that I go out of the Metroplex to film or television, most of the stuff, most of the time. There's a few things here, commercial-wise. There's a lot of voiceover, commercial, industrial, it's big. But film and television, I'm usually traveling somewhere to shoot. Although I have shot a couple of films this past year here, which was really cool. So,
great, thank you. And we're going to get back to that travel question in a minute. I want to check in with Lewis and talk about Boston. What seems to be consistently going on in Boston for the actors in that North England area?
Sure. Boston, we've been lucky here in Massachusetts. We've got this Massachusetts film tax credit, which we've had for the last, 8 or 10 years, and it's drawn a lot of local productions. So I mentioned Manchester by the Sea, Black Mass, Company Men, The Town, Chappaquiddick, Ted Kennedy stories coming out next year. So that's been a big boon. It was on the chopping block last year at the State House, but it survived with a lot of rallying from the local SAG office and others. So hopefully that will continue. There's a fair amount of commercial work too. A lot of the companies in the area and all that, and high tech going on. There was a lot of corporate industrial work here, which we did a lot of, and that dried up, unfortunately. I think a lot of it went non-union. But I've actually just heard there's a new agreement or something that they're testing out now here from the local SAG-AFTRA office, where they're going to be hopefully getting back some of that corporate industrial stuff. There's some voiceover. There's also WGBH, which does a lot of productions and stuff. So there's some opportunities there, and tons of theater too. I mean, we have 15 to 20 equity houses in Boston, sort of greater Boston down through Cape Cod, Berkshires, up in New Hampshire. So there's a lot of opportunity for that too.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about that travel, because obviously being in a local market, you're probably traveling farther for auditions or bookings than maybe an actor in New York or Los Angeles. So we'll jump back to you, Morgana, since you mentioned it. How far are you traveling? What does travel look like for you if it's an audition or a booking? Kind of talk us through a couple of those scenarios that you go through.
That's funny. I'm so like the worst on directions. So I live by my Waze.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys know what Waze is. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's my Bible. I travel a lot of mileage. So 200 or 300 miles to and from, actually round trip. Austin, Louisiana, Oklahoma, just depending on the project. But it is definitely part of it for film and television. I didn't mention that there is a lot of theater here too. So if you do that, which I do occasionally when I can, I love theater. But film and television is my heart and soul. I love the roles. I've been very blessed with some great roles, and I will travel to wherever it goes to get the work if it's a great role.
Absolutely.
How we are.
Definitely. My other panelists, are you guys traveling a lot, or is there enough work in your local areas to kind of keep you busy in the greater Atlanta or Chicago or Boston area?
Yeah, I can speak on that. In Atlanta, I do hear of a lot of people that travel for jobs. The farthest I've ever traveled, I actually went last week to South Carolina. It's about 250 to 300 miles. But I can say that in about 4 years I've been here, I probably have only done that about maybe half a dozen times. There's enough work in Atlanta that you don't have to travel that far outside. And if you do, you're going to go to Nashville, you're going to go to South Carolina, North Carolina. It's usually going to be one of those. I do believe that New Orleans, actually, their local requires you to live there. So they don't like to venture outside. So I think most of us stay put. But I know that there are a lot of people that do travel a lot more than I do.
This is Lewis. I'll just speak from the Boston perspective here. We're 4 hours by car from New York, so there's a lot of back and forth there. I haven't really ventured into the New York market, but I have a lot of friends who do, or also people who were living in Boston, moved to New York, but then come back up here for auditions that are based out of Boston. There's a fair amount of film work too that's in the New England area, so shooting in Vermont or New Hampshire, Maine, but a lot of those will cast out of Boston because we're sort of the focal point for a lot of actors, and there's a pretty sizable pool here, and also in Providence too, but mostly for that New England area, obviously, because if you're heading southward, you've got New York, where it's just tons of folks.
And for Chicago, most of the work is actually here in Chicago, where you're not going to travel that far. Sometimes I'll get an audition down in Atlanta, or I'll get an audition for like Pittsburgh, but I'm never traveling to audition. I'll do self-submissions,
right,
and then travel if I get the job. Yeah, but most of the traveling that people do, man, it's either they're heading out of town to go to New York or LA, and that's really the next stepping stone to travel for us.
So let's talk a little bit about that in comparison to the day jobs that actors need to have to kind of pay the bills and make things happen in the slow time. In a smaller market, or a market that maybe isn't used to having actors who also have to travel to go work or take a couple days off, how do you guys balance kind of the actor life with also maybe a day job, and when you do have to travel or X, Y, and Z, how do you guys kind of all make that work? Let's start with Marie. Do you have any insight for that?
Oh yeah, I think I have one of the coolest day jobs. I work at Starbucks. Only a couple of days a week, but
Yeah.
you get free coffee. There's not as, I remember when I lived in Los Angeles, everybody worked in a restaurant, or they did some sort of freelance work on the side. There's actually a lot of that here too. So another thing that I do birthday parties for kids. So I dress up as characters from Disney or Nickelodeon, and that's very flexible. I can say yes or no to a job. I know a ton of actors who do those types of jobs. There's a lot of actors who actually have their own businesses because self-taping is so big. Many actors have self-taping businesses where they can film other actors. It's really smart, actually, and also really helpful to your fellow actors. There's also a lot of actors who do things like photography. But I do know some that have corporate jobs, and they can, because if you get a self-tape, all you really need to do is, you know, wait to the evening. Hopefully you've got at least 24 hours notice, and you don't have to take off work until you book the job. And by then you have a good conversation with your boss about that. So that's what we do.
Definitely. What is some insight from other panelists? What jobs are you hearing actors do in your area to kind of, you know, pay the bills and survive through the ups and downs?
Well, I'll speak up. I wear a lot of hats. I can speak for myself. I choreograph, I direct sometimes. I have worked on the other side of the camera, wardrobe. I love the industry. So for me, it helps to be very close to it in all kinds of ways. I think I grow as an artist, and I learn so much more, and I see it through the eyes of the other designers and the production people that we work with. So I wear a lot of hats to make ends meet in what I do when times are going up and down. But I know there are a lot of people here in Dallas and Fort Worth that are in the film and television industry that are have their own businesses. As Marie said, they are massage therapists, or they do hair, or you kind of find your way to make it work for you if you love it. You find those avenues. Yep.
I couldn't agree with Morgana more than, you know, when you said, you know, keeping a job that keeps you inside the industry. I think that that's so important, because as we kind of walk away from it for a little bit to make money, we can't walk away from the art. And so there's a lot of actors and artists in Chicago that do some production work. Where, I mean, we've been fortunate enough lately where for the past couple of years, CineSpace opened up. And so that brought tons of production work to Chicago as far as film and television. Not tons, I don't want to say tons, but you know, we have 9 shows shooting right now, which is huge for Chicago. And a lot of them are housed over at CineSpace. And so you got people that are jumping in and doing PA work and production work and wardrobe and locations. And when they're not doing that, a lot of my friends do teaching artist work. Because we're such a rich town, our theaters have education, arts education components to them. And that's actually one of my day jobs. I teach with a theater company, Timeline theater company, where I'm also an associate artist. And it's just fantastic because I can get in, I'll go into a class for 6 classes, and then I'm done, you know. Or if I'm working on a project at that time, I can say, oh, well, no, I can't take it at this time, offer to another one of the teaching artists. And all of the bigger houses in Chicago have those types of programs.
Great. And Louis, you mentioned you started in production and then move over to acting. Do you jump back into production every once in a while to get into it and kind of help pay the bills?
I haven't. I've thought about it, but the problem with the production work is it's so sort of all-encompassing, and I still have friends that do it, and it's 12, 14-hour day. So, but I similar to the other folks, juggling a lot of balls. I do an educational theater group called Theater Espresso that goes to schools and does stories of social justice and history. That's awesome because it's usually, sometimes a 6 a.m. call time, but it's usually you're done by 11 or noon. And that can be, sporadic, or if you have something else, they have understudies and all that. And it's rewarding work, and it's, great to work with kids. I also do a training program at Children's Hospital Boston, where I play a parent of sick kids, teaching clinicians how to communicate, in difficult conversations, and that's fascinating. And then just piecing together whatever else I can, some voiceover stuff, again, stuff out of GBH. I've done voiceover for Frontline there, and other things. But, again, similar to other cities, in Boston, also a lot of people teaching, because there's so many schools here, from Emerson to BU to Boston Conservatory. So tons of people that teach, and that can be a pretty a great way to support yourself. Also just, everything, computer work. There's so many high-tech things around here that people are able to do sort of freelance computer stuff, or the corporate gigs where you have a boss who understands what you're doing and says, okay, yeah, go do that audition, go do that thing. And so I have a bunch of friends who do that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, and especially sometimes with a full-time job, you get enough pay time off that can be helpful too. So, great. Let's jump. Go ahead.
Can I share one thing? Yeah, no, I was just going to say the one piece of advice that I would share, because I've had some conversations with actors who've moved here, is to make sure whatever your side job is, your day job that pays the bill, make sure that it is flexible ahead of time to being able to go on an audition. Because for instance, I work at 4:30 in the morning. I get off at 10:30 the latest. And I can't tell you how many actors come and they have the dream, but they get the day job and then they never leave it because, they're not able to be flexible with the schedule. So I love all the ideas that the other actors on this panel were sharing. Those are really helpful.
Thank you, Marie. Charles, can you jump in and talk a little bit about percentages-wise of live auditions versus self-tape? Kind of in your audition kind of schedule, how many times are you going into an office versus putting something on tape?
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, most of the things that I do are right in that Chicagoland area. So I'm probably at about 80-20%.
Okay.
And that 20% is the self-tape. I also do a nice amount of self-recording for VO as well. So that, I actually just booked a gig. I was on another gig and I was ran into a closet. Like, okay, hey, this is Charles Andrew Gardner reading this thing and booked a gig. So technology makes it so easy. So most of the stuff, like I said, is Atlanta or Pittsburgh. I've sent some stuff there. I've also sent a few things to LA. From Chicago, but then also my wife and I, we love to travel. So with me being able to self-tape, I'm able to get away and not kind of have this anxiety of I can't go anywhere because I can't audition. I just always take my tripod and I always take my little microphone plug-in so that way I can just audition anywhere.
Yeah. Morgana, how often, you said you're traveling a lot, so on the audition self-taping front, are you self-taping more than you're actually going live to auditions?
Absolutely. It's funny because Charles said 80-20. Well, it's 80% self-tape and 20% going in for me. I mean, almost everything I do is self-tape, or, very few things do I go straight in. I have either have a great relationship with casting directors. They know my work. So a lot of time I'm called. If I am called in, I will make that trip to Austin straight to a casting director and producer and director because they know of my work and I'm responsible and my credits. So it's worth it. But I love the self-tape thing because you can go anywhere. I'm sorry. Am I moving too much, Marcus? I hear a little bit of feedback. I'm trying to be mindful.
Okay.
Is that better?
We'll hold it. We're getting a little probably feedback there. Let's jump to Marie. Atlanta's busy, but I hear Atlanta, you self-tape a lot for still being a pretty busy market. Is that correct?
Yes, and it's the saddest thing that I miss is going into the room. Every time we go to in-person auditions and you see other actors, it's like, oh my gosh, where have you been? Because you just don't have that culture anymore. So I would definitely say, 90% of the film and TV is taped. There are some casting directors that will call people in if they haven't seen their work, like Morgana was saying, because they want to see, can they take direction? But if they've seen you several times, they're comfortable with getting a self-tape from you. Commercials is opposite. I've had 2 commercial auditions that were taped. The rest were in person, and so those are always nice.
Yeah, that tends to be a lot of...
Go ahead, I agree. Sorry. No, it's commercial work. Very rarely do I self-tape, but I do more film and television than I do commercial. So the commercial work, though, that's 90% going in when it happens for me.
Great. How about you, Lewis, in Boston?
Yeah, it's interesting to hear all the different perspectives because I think here, I've been doing this for about 12 years here in Boston. 95% in person, very little self-taping. It's interesting. The clients used to be more in the room for commercial and all that. Now for the initial thing, they're never in the room or very rarely. In Boston, there's 4 casting directors in the city. There were only 3. A 4th just started last year. And there's no agents, so there's no representation with agents. You just have a direct relationship with the casting director, and they call you in. And so again, 95% it's in person, which is great because you get that direct feedback. You also get to see your fellow actors there, and then the callback level would always have the client or the producer if it's a film and or director there. But that initial one is usually live. I think there are people in Greater New England who obviously self-tape and send in, but because so much is sort of Boston Central here, a lot of people show up in person, and people again come from New York to show up in person to be live here.
Wow. We got a question on Twitter from Sherry Richards, who she's curious about what percentage of bookings happen off self-tape. So is the book, if the audition before the callback or the audition before the booking, is that always in person, or are you seeing that you're booking a lot off of self-tape depending on the project? Let's start, since Morgana, since you self-tape a lot, what's the perspective for you in the Dallas area?
I book a lot off the self-tapes. I also go in straight to the producers and directors and book off of that too. So my percentage is pretty high on most of it. You know, I haven't thought about it in a percentage wise, like, look, you know, but pretty successful, I would say.
How about Marie?
Both ways, really.
Yeah. Great, thank you, Morgana. Marie, because you're saying you're still self-taping a lot. Are you booking in Atlanta off the self-tapes, or do you still kind of have to go in before they commit?
So that's a really good question. So there's definitely a difference between the type of roles that are booked off tape and the type that aren't. Yeah. So, you know, I played a nurse in a TV show and I just had 1 or 2 lines. That was booked off of tape. But I played another role where I had to go into see the casting director and, you know, had like 4 different directions. So that was obviously for a much bigger role. Recurring roles and bigger roles, guest stars, they'll watch your tape and then they'll call you in for an audition. So there's a difference between that. I would say probably 50% of the things I book off of tape. And then occasionally the casting director will have you retape something. They'll give you direction as if you were in the room. And that is not always the most fun, because especially for people who don't have their own taping services, they have to go pay again for someone else and take the time off again for someone else to retape. But sometimes they do that, and they'll just give you very specific notes and retape that way.
Great. How often? I'm just curious. How often is it just a one-time retape, or have you had a couple times where you've had to redo it?
I have had twice where I've had to do 3 times, and unfortunately, the first time, you know, they gave us the instructions, and then I did my audition, and then several hours later, they said, actually, we got more notes from the casting director. Incorporate these notes. And it was like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have known that ahead of time. And then there was another time where the director, I think he really wanted to find a role for me. And I was like, thank you so much. So he had me read a couple of different roles, and then with the last one, just redo it like 3 different ways. And sometimes they'll just have you put them back to back to back on the same tape. So only twice have I had to do it, more than twice, 3 times. But that means they're interested in you. So that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing.
Totally. You just have to be prepared on your end to be able to do that and quickly return it.
Yes.
Yeah. So then you were talking about, Charles, since you're live, I assume a lot of the stuff is being booked off of the live callback or the live audition, since you said 80% of what you're doing callback audition-wise is live. But voiceover is a little different. Can you talk a little more about voiceover? Are you doing multiple auditions, or just a one-time send-in and they pick you or not pick you?
Yeah, the majority of the time, like 99% of the time, it's you get the audition. I always go into my agent's office and record when I can. Yeah. Just because then I'm checking in with them. They see me, I see them, and it's an extra set of ears on my audition. But I submit it from there, and then 99% of the times I'll get the job. No callback or anything like that, straight from there. There has been 1 or 2 times that I had to redo it. So, and with that, they specifically say, hey, we're interested in booking him, but we want to give this direction. So they gave me a different direction just to make sure that I could take it and I booked a gig from there.
Great. I got a question from a Los Angeles actor, Meredith Riley Stewart, who has a question about an LA actor. I'm going to actually pose this to Marie. Do you know any of your LA friends who fly into Atlanta to go on a callback? What's your thoughts on that? What have you heard? Is it advisable? Talk a little bit about that.
So, okay, so this is an interesting thing. Yes, there are a handful of actors who they work coast to coast. They've got an agent in Los Angeles. They've got an agent in Atlanta. Sometimes they've even got an agent in New York. I wouldn't say that it's you obviously you can do it, but I think that we really want to support in our market in Atlanta. We really want to support actors that are here. You know, there is unfortunately a stigma about local markets, that you can't find good actors, and so there's oftentimes where casting directors they like you, producers they like you, but because you're not from Atlanta or New York, you know, they want to cast from LA. But oftentimes those Atlanta actors are getting an LA address, an LA agent, so they are the Atlanta actor. And then sometimes, like me, I was the LA actor who came to Atlanta. So it can get kind of confusing, but I think that a lot of the casting directors are really trying to support the talent that is here. And I think they know who's flying in and who missed that callback because their plane, didn't make it, or because it was a last minute audition and they couldn't book their flight in time. I think they start to figure out who's who. So I hope that answers the question. Definitely, and I'm actually going to pose this kind of the same question to Lewis, because I'm sure some of the Boston actors feel like, New York's close enough where they can kind of get the best of both worlds. How does that work? How does it get a little tricky with an actor thinking that way?
I think that's definitely true, and I think for producers it is great. It is the best of both worlds, because you have a pretty sizable pool here, but then New York is right around the corner. But I think it also depends on the production. I mean, some productions hire very few local actors. Others hire a lot, and sometimes they come back. Ben Affleck shot here a couple times. David O. Russell, I think, has done 3 films here and hires a lot of Boston actors. I think also casting directors do get some incentive. If they cast a certain number of roles, or that role, they get an extra bump. So they try hard to fill those roles with Boston actors because they get the bump, and it also saves the producers, a ton in terms of travel and per diem and hotel and all that. So I think the nice thing about Boston is that sort of local pool of talent feels like it's being more honored and respected now, as this sort of, especially the film work here, has really built up some momentum.
Right, and there's definitely a Boston flavor and everything that you can sense in films that is unique to Boston.
Well, that's true. It's true, and it's funny. They're always like Boston accent, no Boston accent, Boston accent, no Boston accent. And yeah, it's always but it always ends up being, of course, somebody who's Australian playing, an FBI Boston agent or whatever.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Great accents, though. So.
We got another question here at Twitter that's kind of around this topic of self-tape. TV Blake Bowden asked, what type of equipment are you using? Let's start with Morgana. What's your advice on self-tapes, since you're doing it a lot? What's to be mindful of? Do you self-tape yourself? Do you get help? Kind of talk about your process.
Interesting process that is always changing. I'm going to try to adjust this.
Okay.
It literally, my agent, her husband was a DP. Oh. So I'm very fortunate because I get great tapes when I go into the agency. I also am finding my own things, my own ways, depending on where I'm at. I have several, I have an iPad, I have a little iPhone that I use like an iPad. I take them with me to every shoot in case I need to be put on tape. I have a little light that I have set up right now that I carry with me in case I need to change the lighting depending on where I'm shooting. And I just make it work. Usually I can see it. I play it back and I can see it. So I make sure that it looks right. But it's a lot of trial and error, but you kind of figure out what works for you, I think.
Great. Marie, how about you? Do you have your own self-taping? Are you just calling every friend when something comes up? How is your process and equipment you use and stuff?
Well, actually, the setup that I have right now is very similar to what I use for self-tapes. I do have my own setup at home. I ordered some light boxes off of Amazon. My husband helped me to get the right kind of bulbs. And sometimes, depending on the ambiance of the scene, I'll have one light or I'll have two. If it's a little more theatrical or, in a period time, I might have less light. But I make sure that I have a good quality camera. I have a handheld camera I put on a tripod. I make sure that the quality of the sound is very clear. And the casting directors in Atlanta are very specific about once you have your own equipment, how you actually do it, proper framing and making sure it's not vertical if you use an iPhone. But when it comes to self-taping, if I can go to my acting coach, I will go to her. And I think the temptation with self-taping is if you could just do it yourself, you do it yourself. But the reality is, if you really want the best performance, try to go to a coach, but also go where you can get really good quality lighting. So she's got even better setup than I do. So yeah, smaller roles though. My husband helps me, which is cool. And yeah.
Test. So we're gonna, I'm gonna ask a quick question and mute me so we can get this going. So,
Dennis, can I just jump in there real quick?
yeah, keep going.
If you can cut that, I don't know if you can, but anyway, I was just saying about self-taping. I don't do much, but when I do, I think it's also really important, which Maria was just referencing too, is if you can have somebody as a scene partner, obviously it helps so much. And if you have a friend who's an actor, my girlfriend's an actress, so it really helps that, and she'll do those scenes with me. And get the eye line as close to the camera as possible so that you're really, presenting yourself as best in the lighting, like Maria was saying, that really helps, if you're by yourself and you have to do it by yourself, you do. But if you can get someone that you really like as an actor to interact with you, that's really fantastic.
Yes.
And to jump in on that, I use my wife too. We've been at it for a long time now. So I spent so much time being okay, she's not an actress either. And so I'm like, this is text work. This is how we break down.
Yeah.
And we do it the same way. So I use my iPhone. I got a little mount for my iPhone and put it on a tripod. I keep that with me all the time. And I use natural light. So if I can avoid it, I always shoot during the day, right by a window. So that way I don't have to worry about, the light. And I want to second it. The sound is so important. You have to have good quality sound. And you have to watch back what you send. Don't submit it without it. But Lewis, to speak of what you were just saying, if you don't have a friend, find one, and find one now before you get the audition. So that way you have 5 or 6 actor buddies or 5 or 6 people that know how to read well and give a little bit of emotion, and just have them on speed dial. So that way, especially coming up on pilot season, right now is the time to find those people and really just work scenes.
And then you help them out when they have an audition, and it's good for everybody because everybody's, each time you do it, it's like a little mini acting class, as you learn and you build that up. So.
Yeah. And
no, go ahead.
Okay. I think what Charles is saying about the reader is actually really important. I love that you mentioned that because I totally do that with my husband too, teaching him how to read. But that's one of the comments that casting directors have shared a lot, is that the reader can distract because they don't know how to read. They don't want the reader to act and upstage you, but also not to be monotone to where they distract from the performance. And using yourself, I know some actors, they record their voice and then they try to jump in. It doesn't really allow for those organic moments that you have with the reader, but also it's kind of weird hearing your voice and then your voice again. So just try not to do that. Make friends with your neighbors. Teach someone how to be a great reader. They might become a fellow actor. You never know. So yeah, get a good reader.
And I want to add into all of that. I'm a perfectionist too, and I've been doing this a while. So I make sure and always watch it back. If I don't believe it, I don't send it. It has to be the lighting, the sound, all of those things everyone has touched on the panel is so important. Having a good person there. I always have a reader also, unless you have to do just like a monologue or something. And if you can do it, do it. But again, I have an agent whose husband was a DP, and he's really great, and that's great. But when I can't use him, having a reader, having good lighting, having good sound, someone you trust that you can watch, it's not ever, you don't ever want to send anything in just half-assed. Can I say that?
Yeah.
You want it to be your best because you don't know who's watching, and this is your career. So do your best.
Great.
If you believe it, you've got to believe you. If you don't believe you, then it's not good.
Preach, preach.
I had to say that.
It's true.
It's the truth. Preach it.
Go.
We showing next.
Hi,
Who's
Dennis.
going?
I don't know. Moment
I'm
of
sorry,
silence.
Dennis. Sorry.
Yeah.
Are we
Ooh, I
all
think we
good?
might have-
I don't know if Dennis
Good.
can
Sorry,
hear us. Good.
I was
Yeah,
pausing
yeah.
there because the building was doing another announcement. Of course.
Oh, that
Okay,
is so
thank you.
fun.
Perfect timing. This is
Great
what we get for
timing.
live television. These are all great advice. I appreciate your self-taping advice. Thank you for that. And I know our audience appreciates it as well. We're going to transition into a little bit about representation. Kelsey Saunders emailed a question of talking a little bit about the agents in your local markets. What are the requirements? Kind of how many are there? Obviously, it's smaller pools of agents than in New York or Los Angeles. So is that a good thing, or is that harder to get into an agency? Kind of talk about the kind of what's it like with agents in your various markets, and we'll start with Charles in Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, my advice would be, real quick, who's watching this? Is this just SAG members, or is this
It
non-union
can
too?
also be non-union members too. It's anybody can watch it. Yeah.
Cool. What I would say is, if you're union, if you're non-union, it doesn't matter. Try to find a SAG franchised agency. So that way, when you are ready to make that jump, you don't have to change around and find somebody new. So like that's, try to find a SAG, and you can go to SAG's website and find that for your market, and it's super easy to find. There's about, I think there's 11 or 12, somewhere right around there in Chicago of SAG franchise agents. And what my recommendation for trying to get representation is do your part first. Nobody wants to bring on a talent that isn't trying to do something, especially if you're in a market where there's colleges and there's theaters. You can find indie work. You can find smaller work to get started and build a resume, build a reel, and then submit that, because at least that way they know that you're not depending on them to do everything. Agents are really supposed to just amplify what you're already doing and get you into the room that you can't get into by yourself. So get a resume, get a reel. If there's a college in town, or if there's like indie shorts or independent films, do as much of that as possible, even before you think about approaching them. And figure out who you are too. Like, figure out what you want to do. If you want to do television, great. Then watch a bunch of television and shoot a bunch of television type, scenes with your friends. So if it's film, do that, and then approach those actors, those agents for those specific goals that you have in mind.
Yes.
Great. How about Marie? Thoughts on reps in Atlanta?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what Charles is saying. Obviously, finding an agent is super important. You virtually can't get any work without having an agent. In Atlanta, over the last 4 years, the landscape of agents has changed. There's so many agencies that have started here, many from LA that have started chapters here. I would say that it is pretty competitive in this market to get an agent, and that's a great thing because there's a lot of great talent here. With that being said, like Charles was saying, when you're looking for an agent, do your research. And the number one thing understanding is that your agent gets 90% or gets 10%, you get 90%. That's for a reason. So you gotta do your research, and it's better for you to wait 6 months and get your stuff together than to submit, because these agents will tell you, I don't want to see you again for 6 months. You're not ready. Now you have to wait. But if you take the time to find out and look through the roster, what do they have someone that looks like me? What do they specialize in? If just taking the time like that can really help. I think when there's a lot of actors who come from New York or LA, they can think often that because they've got a big resume, someone's going to sign them automatically. Sometimes that does happen, but sometimes they've already got someone who's just as good, or they're not sure exactly who you are and you don't have a relationship with the casting directors yet, like someone in their agency already does. So just considering those things and being patient and doing your research first.
Great. Morgana, advice for the agents in your area?
Oh, I agree with everything Marie and Charles are saying. Do your work, know who you are, do the research. If you're looking for an agent, you should always interview them, and they should be excited about you. That's, I think, the most important thing. You can interview with a lot of agents, and here in the DFW area, there are a few agents that you can go with. There are different ones that their biggest thing might be the industrial or commercial. And if you've got a great look and that's what you do and you know it, that's what you should go in for. But the most important thing I have found in my career that I could share is that they have to be excited about you. If they're not excited about you and you're just another head in their count, then what's the point? So do your work. There's definitely great agents here in the DFW area and a lot of work. And if you're good and you do everything, get your tools, your headshots, your resume, your reel if you have some work. And if you don't have some work, I'm going to step on a limb and say, I wouldn't put together a fake reel. I've seen some fake reels that look really bad. Mm-hmm. Get out there and do some indie films, these student films. Get some work where you can get some quality. They want to see you do the real work. So that's when an agent is going to take time, because they're going to know you're doing the work. Because you do the work. The agent doesn't. They do all the negotiating, but you put yourself out there. And then they get you indoors that you can't get in because you don't have an agent. I mean, that's why SAG franchise is exactly the way to go, because you want the real deals if this is what you're going to do as a career, you know.
Great. A follow-up question for you, Morgana. Since you are traveling to Austin and some of more frequently than some of our other panelists, do you or other actors tend to also look outside of your immediate Dallas-Fort Worth area for agents? Kind of talk about an agent covering a certain region, especially in your area.
That's a very good question. I have had different agents in different areas at different times in my career. Mm-hmm. So it's a personal thing, and I think it depends on the economy, and it depends on, like, I think right now, it was recommended to me that I get some agents and representation, and I actually have talked to a manager in LA. I think do your homework on that too. I'm doing it. If it feels like it's going to work for me to do that, I will do it. I'm all about the work. So I will go wherever the work is. If someone's interested in me, I will come out and see them. And if it means work for both of us, then I'm super excited, because I love what I do. Yeah. You know, I want to do more. So the more I can put it out there, the more I would do it. So I am contemplating looking into some other areas for more representation, because I would like to do more. You know, I'd like to up the scale here, just because you know, I travel a lot, I don't mind it, and I love what I do.
Great. I'm going to follow up this also with Marie, because we have a question here that kind of applies to this before we get to Lewis, because I want to talk about your unique agent situation in a moment. Marie, Sabina on email says she moved to North Carolina, and her agent says that you only get one Southeast rep. So it's more of not so much a state, but a whole region. Is that your understanding too? And kind of talk about if your Atlanta agent covers you in the Southeast, what is the Southeast versus when it crosses over to like New Orleans or a different location and requires maybe a different agent? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's a good idea to just have one agent in the Southeast because I know there are a lot of agents that are in North Carolina, South Carolina, and some other Southeast states, and they do cross over. So if you have an agent in North Carolina and you have an agent in Atlanta, it gets, obviously you're going to have to, you can only pay one person and they're going to start fighting over things. What's more common is that there'll be an actor who has a print agent in one market and then a theatrical TV film agent in a different market. I think that the agencies have really been trying to cut down on that just because even some of the commercial agents are starting to branch into doing TV and film. So when you're talking about the Southeast, you're talking about, the Carolinas, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia. More commonly, I hear of people in Florida having their own agent and an Atlanta agent. It seems that little peninsula thing is its own little world.
They're doing their own
so
thing.
I guess that's okay. And then, like I said, in New Orleans, and don't quote me on this, but in New Orleans, they really want you to live there. And so they don't really call people to come to New Orleans that much. But I have gotten one or two. So
Great. Wonderful.
just have one.
Yeah, absolutely. So Lewis, let's talk a little bit about Boston, because I think you have a unique situation that surprised many actors in the sense of you guys don't have agents there. Talk a little bit about that and how does that all work?
Yeah, I guess that is a different setup here. There are actors here who do have representation in New York and some folks in LA too. They live here, they go to New York for auditions and film, TV, but that's a handful of people. But here, again, it's this direct relationship with the casting directors, which becomes very important, obviously. And I think one way actually that people have broken in, I know, is they offer classes, a lot of them. So you can sign up for a class and then they get to see you, see your work. And I know people who've, booked stuff that way. I'm also going to agree with all the other advice here. And Charles mentioned, student things. I think that's a great way to do it, especially in Boston. BU Emerson, they have some amazing, I actually judged some films last year. These were graduating films. They looked amazing. The technology now is incredible and they can do all kinds of great stuff. So you can get some beautiful stuff. And actually one of the casting directors in town, Carolyn Pickman at CP Casting, hooked up with Boston University and has a whole thing where they get actors to form like a little pool workshop to work with their film students, which is a great collaboration. There's also some excellent online stuff here, and I don't know if you guys have same resources. New England Actors Network is a thing where you can post your reel and your resume and headshot, super low, annual fee of like $20 or something. And also Stage Source, which lists auditions. Again, you can post your reel and photos and stuff. So there's some resources that way. But yeah, we do not have agents, which is an interesting anomaly here. But those relationships with the casting directors are important, and they get to know you, and I think there's sort of a similar relationship that you have with an agent, where they know your work, they know what you can do. They call you, they say, hey, this is perfect for you. Can you make it? What are you doing a show? Can you be here? The director's coming, blah, blah, blah. I've talked you up. So there is a really nice personal connection that can develop.
Great. To follow up on that, because normally with agents will submit on a per project basis, and then obviously casting selects the people they want to come in. Are actors submitting themselves, or does just casting just directly reach out to you when they have a project that they're working on?
Exactly. So casting reaches out when they have a project. Sometimes it's a massive cattle call for a commercial or something. They don't know what they're looking for. But usually for commercial and the film, TV stuff, they call you. So it is also sometimes hard to get on their radar. You have to send your stuff in, either digitally and by mail. They say, but yes, some of them still want stuff by mail to see, headshots. But then they get to know you and they call you specifically in, usually again for a first round just for the casting director. And then they tape it, send it off. And then next round will be either for the New York or LA casting director if they're coming in for a film. And or the director. And sometimes you have, I had a project where you have multiple callbacks for the director, which is great because you get that sort of live feedback. And again, they see if you can make an adjustment. So that is an advantage to that versus the self-tape.
Great. I'm gonna, this is gonna be a question for all my panelists. I'm gonna start with Marie. We got a question on Twitter here. How do you keep positive when it's quiet and there's no work going on? It's a little kind of personal. How do you guys keep motivated, keep positive, keep upbeat? don't get too down when it's a little slow?
Well, actually, 2017 is the perfect year for that question, because I think I would say I feel it's gotten slower than in the past couple of years, but I've been inspired to be working on my own projects. So I started writing a SAG New Media web series, and it's really inspired me because I'll be working on that project and talking to producers and writing different specs and just doing a lot of research, and then all of a sudden I have an audition, and it was like I wasn't sitting there waiting for it. And it feeds directly into why I'm doing what I'm doing. The other thing I'm doing a weekly vlog this year, and every week I share actor tips, I share what I'm working on, and I share what I call a faith lesson, which is what I'm learning that's keeping me going. And so this year has been perfect. I think what I take from all this is you have to find things to feel what you're doing and realize that it's not about booking the jobs and being on set all the time. It's really about bringing the character to life and enjoying what you're doing, using the things around you, the resources, the paychecks to enjoy your life. And so those are some of the things that I do to stay inspired.
Love it. Charles, how about yourself? How do you keep positive and keep upbeat when things are a little slower down?
Yeah, never let things get slower down.
Oh.
Just, and not from a working standpoint, from a doing the work standpoint. Just like you said, Marie, you have to control your own career. So like there in Chicago, there is a group of us that gets together and have monologue Mondays where we'll work on monologues together. We'll just do it. And it's not for anybody. We're not like recording it to submit it. We're just doing it to be acting. And I'm producing a film right now where it's just like, I wanted to act in something and I want to be able to narrate the stories that I want to share. And so I was like, let me learn this SAG contract so I can do it myself and write my own stuff, so that way I'm always working. And even on my own, I've gotten into the routine now of doing my own self-submission tape. So that, because I don't get a lot of self-submission, I don't want it to be rusty when I do get a big opportunity. So once every 2 weeks, I'll break out an old script that I got like 4 or 5 years ago that I forgot. And I'll say, hey, Charles, you got 3 days to tape this thing.
Yeah.
And I'll tape it and I'll watch it back. And then I'll just say, okay, cool, now I know. And then 2 weeks later, I'm doing the exact same thing. Because not only does that keep you excited about the craft, it also keeps you well-oiled and in tune. I also do yoga every morning. I drink a cup of tea. Pretty cool.
All connected. Love it. Love it. Morgana, how about yourself? How do you keep busy or just positive? How does it work for you?
I'm very similar. I find projects to be involved, or they find me. It goes in cycles, I find. I had just finished shooting Salem, the season, and I really put it out there, and I'm very spiritual. I put it out there that I really was ready to bite into a good play from beginning to finish, something that would just challenge me. And because television and film, you're on and off, and you come in and you really have to know what you're doing because you have 3 cameras on you and get there. So what do? I was like excited I wanted to do something. I put it out there and I came off of Salem and went right into The Goat by Edward Albee. It was offered to me and I welcomed it. And it was just a little window. But it kept me fulfilled and it honed my craft. And then I was wearing a producer hat. There's a little, a sitcom that's being shot locally. And I got involved in that. I said this at the beginning, you wear a lot of hats and you love them. And you learn to, when you have downtime, I take quiet time for myself. I have to have quiet time for myself, so that I can know that I'm doing the right things and make sure I'm doing it for the right reasons. Because it's really all about, and this is going to be corny, but for me, love. putting it out there, you get it back and you give it back. And that makes a difference. If I can make a difference that way, I feel like that's one of the gifts that I get and I'm able to give in the career that I've chosen to, you know, go forward in and love.
Great.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Louis, same question to you. How do you keep positive or just kind of keep busy as things ebb and flow?
Yeah, it definitely can be a struggle sometimes. And, you know, Boston, New England, you know, January, February is sort of the dead months up here. I mean, mostly spring, summer, fall is big shooting times here. So it can be hard. I mean, I do a lot of theater and I try to stay active that way too. But you really also just have to, you know, believe in yourself and what you're doing. And it can be a struggle. Also, when I did production work, I spent a lot of time on the other side of the casting table. And I can say, I mean, that you get a call back. I think you've achieved your goal because you've shown that you are serious about what you're doing. They want to see more and you have something that they want. Beyond that level, the decision can be about anything. It can be about your height, your look, you know, the craziest, most random decision-making processes can take place that I witnessed. And so you can ask yourself, why didn't I get cast? Why didn't I get cast in this thing? And it can be about the last thing that you might consider in your mind. So you just have to kind of believe in yourself and practice, like everyone else is saying too. And in Boston, there's a bunch of playwriting groups and readings and workshops. You get hooked up with those or classes where you go in, act, you know, scene work. And it's just great to stay busy with that kind of stuff too. So.
Great. We have a question here on Twitter from, again, Meredith Riley Stewart, who asked about the film festivals in your areas. So actors can network with filmmakers, but also if you're like some of you creating your own work, can also network with fellow peers. Marie, what are some of the film festivals in your area that people tend to go to or network at?
So the main one that comes to mind is the Atlanta Film Festival, and that'll be coming up in April. And I actually attended that for the first time last year, and there were films from all over the world, and it was an incredible experience. I think the cool thing about Atlanta is there's a lot of professional organizations that you can network with throughout the year. And so because it's kind of a smaller, close-knit community, you can really meet a lot of filmmakers through a lot of different organizations like WIFTA, Women in Film and Television Atlanta. And that's not on festival, but these are where everybody in the festivals are going. There's things like New Mavericks, GPP, Georgia Production Partnership. There's this even one that I've gone to, which is Faith in Film, and for Christian-based productions. Obviously, the Screen Actors Guild, the union, there are a lot of filmmakers within our union who are making projects. And so outside of film festivals, you could do those. Those are some of them.
Great. Charles, how about you? What film festivals or just organizations are you meeting other filmmakers, other actors, just kind of keeping connected with everyone working on the industry there?
Yeah. I mean, there's tons of film festivals in Chicago. The first one, the most often that comes up is the Midwestern Film Festival. Actually, I think it's first Tuesday of the month is a film festival. So they show a film that is locally, homegrown, created and shot in Chicago or in the Midwestern area. And that's every month, man. So that's an awesome opportunity. We got the Chicago International Film Festival, Black Harvest Film Festival, and a whole bunch of other ones, where it's just people coming together and just like you said, meeting other actors and other producers and getting on your next project. For organizations, SAG is a really big one. We're really active here in Chicago. So we have a resource center, the Kaufman Resource Center. The actors are always, equity members and SAG members are always encouraged to come and just kind of hang out and just see who's there. We have workshops and classes that we offer, every month. I sit on the board. I'm the vice president of an organization called Creative Cipher, which is all about putting millennial tech-savvy content creators in the realm of filmmaking. And so we have socials, we have film screenings, we have programming all throughout the year to bring filmmakers, millennial filmmakers together and just get us to make our own content. There's all types of Facebook groups, Chicago Actors Film Meetup. I mean, Chicago, man, we don't wait. We get a group of people together. And so in your locals, my advice would be to don't wait. Just get a few friends together and just do it, man. Yeah. And real quick, if I can go back for just a sec, for the last question that you asked, how do you stay positive? How do you, stay focused? Have a life.
Yeah.
Travel, have a hobby, do something outside of the business, because those experiences will give back to your art. It's almost like you were saying with the love. You have to have a full life so that way you can give that full perspective to the art, because that's what we're doing. We're just sharing people's perspectives and sharing people's outlooks on life. And if you're just like this, only trying to act, then your acting will look like that.
Kind of like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Morgana, let's jump to you. What organizations, film festivals, how are people staying connected in the entertainment industry in your area?
We have a lot of festivals and people really trying to pull the community together. Women in Film, Dallas International Film Festival is amazing. The USA Film Festival, there's an Oak Cliff Film Festival. I love the community of filmmakers here. A lot of people with passion, and you just find them. It's easy to find them if that's what you're looking for. Finding the people to connect with. You just look it up, film festivals, you'll find it. And just Facebook. That's amazing, because you can join these groups and they will connect you, and you can go to these networking events and meet people. And that's an amazing way to make new friends, find people with similar interests. If you're wanting to get into the business, get behind the scenes. One of the things that came up while I was listening to you guys talk was the best thing, if you're wanting to be an actor and you're wanting to be serious about it, man, if you can work on the other side of casting and watch actors behind the camera. I've run camera before. It opened my world for what the camera doesn't lie. You can't beat that kind of, experience as an actor, because you're really seeing what they see on the camera, and all of a sudden it becomes a whole new thing. So get involved with as many film festivals or organizations in your area that you can. And I think they're all over. I think there's a lot pretty much everywhere.
Yeah.
Great
Louis,
stuff here, Dallas and Austin.
Great. Louis, what organizations, film festivals are in Boston for actors to connect to the community?
Yeah, there's a couple of good film festivals. Boston Film Festival in the fall, and then a big one is IFFB, Independent Film Festival of Boston, in the spring, which is going on, I think, 13, 14 years. And that's great. They have all kinds of stuff and filmmakers there. And also the SAG office, as Charles mentioned, always is hosting great events and things going on. I mentioned also Stage Source, which is this local resource online, but they also host events, things, seminars about this, that, or the other thing that are great to attend. And again, all the schools, the schools all have sort of active film programs that are always bringing actors in too. That's always helpful.
Great. I want to transition to a question. Maybe there's an actor in Los Angeles or New York who's thinking about moving to your local area for various reasons. I want to start with Marie. What makes Atlanta special? And if you had a friend who lived in Los Angeles or New York moving to Atlanta, what do they need to know, maybe about the region or just about life in Atlanta, to kind of go, okay, this is what I should expect when I'm moving there?
Wow, if I had a friend. I do have friends from LA who want to move here.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing to understand, I would say, is that acting is acting. So because Atlanta is a local market doesn't mean that, you can come and sit back or all of a sudden you're going to shoot to stardom. You've got to work hard. You've got to be in class. So that's the first thing I tell with actors when they come here. Find a class before you get hungry and just want to you expect everything to just fall into place. Find a community of people, ask them what's going on, where do they go to network, what type of things are they learning, what do the casting directors expect, what does it mean to self-tape this much. So that's probably the number one thing, is to find a class and do some research. I think it's very important for union actors, especially, to understand that Georgia is a right to work state. And that means that you can't say no to someone booking a job because they are not in the union. So basically, if you are coming to Atlanta, understand that when you go to an audition, you're going to be with, you might well be with non-union and union members, and the job could go to either one. So a lot of casting directors do try to look at union members first, I believe, but at the end of the day, everyone's in the same pool. Background acting, and specifically, there is no organizational structure for background actors in TV and film. So I used to do a lot of union background in LA. I don't do any in TV and film here. I've only done it for commercials, and that's because the TV and film background work, it's only non-union. So understand that if you are trying to come, and be a part of, some of the big movies that have a lot of background actors. And I think the last thing about Atlanta that I would share is it's a great community. I think it's a great place to strive and work really hard, but maybe there's less of that competitiveness that is in some of the bigger markets. So you can really come here and just feel like you're going to feel a lot of people giving to you and saying hi to you and wanting to help you. I think part of that is the South, but part of it is because of the people who've been here when this market really started to thrive. They're still here, and they just care a lot about the actors coming here. So enjoy it.
I'm going to do one follow-up from the other panels. I'm curious, what makes you stay in Atlanta versus wanting to go back to LA, or if you were from New York? What's about Atlanta is like, yeah, this is my home?
For me?
Yeah.
Oh, follow-up. That's right. Well, I've been way more successful in Atlanta than I was in Los Angeles. So that's one thing. But also, I really love the community here. The SAG-AFTRA office, they work really hard, and as the union, or as the work here in Atlanta has grown just so fast, the union continues to just work extremely hard to make sure that rules are followed, to make sure that changes are made that need to be made, and that just really creates a sense of community. So I really enjoy that. I have a lot of fun. I don't feel as much pressure. Maybe part of that is just me growing up a little bit more. But I think that's what makes me enjoy it. There's plenty to do, and until I book something, every single thing here, and I can't book anything else, then I don't see a reason to leave. Yeah. So, yeah.
Thanks. Great. Charles, what about Chicago? If I was an actor in LA or New York thinking about moving to Chicago, one, what do I need to know? And then two, the follow-up again, what makes you stay in Chicago versus going to a different market?
You're in LA and you're thinking about coming here. You got to know it's cold as hell.
I hear it's windy there.
It's a windy city. Okay. But jokes aside, you just got to know that I love Chicago. We were actually considering moving to LA about 2 years ago, and I decided to stick around, obviously. Partly, like Marie said, because of the community. Like Chicago, because we have this like storefront theater vibe to us, like everybody is all about the work. And that carries throughout theater, and it carries into the commercial auditions, and it carries into the film auditions and the film projects. Everybody's just excited to be working and to be a working actor in Chicago. Like you don't really come to Chicago to become famous. You come to Chicago to work. And you need to know that. Like you're not gonna have nearly as many shows. Like I said earlier, there's 9 shows shooting right now, and 4 of them are Dick Wolf shows. So if you shoot one of them, you can't shoot the other 3. So you're not gonna come and like hit a whole bunch of work, but there is a huge variety of work. If you're coming to Chicago, take advantage of that. and really, really hustle, because Chicago actors hustle, man. Like we like you'll have somebody that's working a regular job, and then they're leaving straight from there, and they're doing rehearsals from 6 to 10 for a theater play, and then they're leaving from there, and they're meeting up with some friends about a project a web series that they're trying to shoot. And we're constantly looking for the next thing to do, and we're happy and excited about doing it. Voiceover is huge, like I said earlier. So do that. That's like I really don't have a day job because I do voiceover and I do commercial work. So that way, when that's working, I got that, and when it's not working, I'm doing a play, and when that's not working, I'm doing film and television. So really, just put your hand in as many pots as you can, and enjoy the city. Right? Like Chicago is beautiful. There's a lot to do. Going from New York, your public transportation system is pretty good, and you can get around pretty easily. But LA, you got to drive everywhere. In Chicago, you don't have to do that. Like you can hop on the train and be anywhere within 20-30 minutes. Especially the casting agencies. They're all about 2 to 3 miles away from the SAG office, which is centrally located downtown. So have fun, man. That's what I would say. That would be my advice.
Good. Morgana, how about you? What do I need to know moving to your area, and what makes you stay in that area?
It's been good to me. That's one reason I stay in the area. But I'm an actor, and I would go anywhere if the work takes me there. So I'm all about the work. I think Dallas, Marie and Charles have both hit on incredible points that are just the same here. There's a Southern hospitality here. You are very welcome. One of the things that I love is there's a relationship with the casting directors. And I would highly recommend what I did early in my career to anybody that was considering moving, to get to know who the casting directors are. And get to know what they like and what they're casting, and get in front of them in any way that you can, because take one of their workshops, because you learn what they like. It's really about knowledge, and that was my journey. I mean, I probably have taken workshops from every casting director over the years to learn who they were and what they like. And then what can I bring to the table to make this work? You're constantly learning. If you're not, and you think that you've got it all, then you need to stay in some little community theater somewhere, waiting for Guffman, because if I ever know it all, then I need to stop what I'm doing. But I like this right here, meeting all of you guys on the panel and listening to you. I'm fascinated, and it's wonderful. We all want the same thing. It's about the work. It's about the love. It's about what you put into it. You wear a different hat. You go down a different road. You wear a producer. You direct. You choreograph. Dallas has that too. So come in and see if you like the vibe. That's what I would say. LA is competitive. LA can be very alone. I've definitely been out there and gone back and forth. And man, you need to have your tribe. You need to have a core, and surround yourself with love and people that get it, and get the toxic ones out. And then you'll do fine,
Great. Same question to you, Louis. What do I need to know? Especially if I'm like in New York going to Boston, or even in LA, obviously the weather is one thing, but what do I need to know, and what keeps you in Boston versus going to a different location?
Yeah, Charles and I might need to have a Chicago-Boston weather comparison showdown. Yeah, weather off, which is the worst. I don't know. This winter's been pretty mild, actually, so I better knock on wood. I think Boston, similar to other places, the community feeling, which really is true. I think it's that really extended family sense, and maybe because we're a regional market, there's sort of that, I think, underdog status, so that everyone really bands together. And you might think that might be insular or off-putting to people coming in from outside, but a lot of people come to Boston, often because their partners get work here, or a teaching thing, or coming back because of family reasons, whatever. And I've seen it over and over. They really quickly get embraced by the local community, you know, actors, but also casting directors and the theaters in town too. And I think that's the other nice thing here. We have such a really robust theater community, which is terrific. I mean, we have, again, I think there's 15 to 20 equity theaters in this area. So there's a lot of equity acting work, which is great. And it is close to New York, which I think is also an advantage for people who want to go down there. It's a 4-hour trip. I haven't ventured there myself. It's something I do think about, but I love Boston. It is my home, and I just love the people here and the feeling. And there's a fair amount of work. We don't have series, as Charles was saying, which is a shame. We've got a lot of film work, and there's just a new studios were built out in old Army base, Fort Devens. It's about an hour outside of Boston. So we're all hoping that a series will come this way, but it's mostly just been the film work. So fingers crossed. But I think, again, enjoying it, and whatever you're doing, wherever you are, you're in the same boat with a lot of other people, you know, similar to you.
I think that's a great place to end. I want to thank you all for joining us and giving us your thoughts and just your perspectives in your various locations. I can tell you're passionate and that you're truly, truly making it happen. I admire that, and as a fellow actor, I salute you guys. Thank you again. Thank you for everyone that's watching. We appreciate your time, and I hope that you found this information educational, and we'll catch you at our next panel. Thank you again, panelists, and everyone. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thanks so much,
you.
Dennis.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, guys. Nice to meet you
Good
all.
night.
See, it was an honor.
Yeah. See you guys later.
Definitely. Thank
All
you.
right.